Oh yeah. Hi, Dom. It's great to see you too here. Awesome. Cool. In that case, yeah. First of all, thanks for joining. Watson. Today it's gonna be our last Fireside chat event. It is week. Kind 8 or 9. I don't know how we can count it because we had a midterm presentation. The thing is, we just have 2 weeks left. So Watson's he's going to share his story about his startup, also how his career transition from the more to transition toward academic side from the research, also a startup product experience. That's we are going to hear from Watson today. And then format is probably similar to also that's he did it last week. So Watson, you could take over screen if you have any slide, or you could just start to speak it, and then we do have a Q&A session. The ref is just it's up to you. It's just gonna be.
I wish I had thought to grab some of our old photo materials. I'm gonna do my best with physical props.
Sounds good. Cool.
So this is I've been involved in a couple 3 startups now, and this is I'm going to tell the story of the one that I was in first, and because I think that's the most salient for students, and it's a funny story now, and it wasn't a funny story at the time, but it is now. So I really think that it has some important points. So I actually still have the t-shirt. So it's right here. Let's see. Hang on. I think I have to turn off virtual background for anyone to actually see anything. There we go. All right, there we go. Ooh, look at that. So that was our logo. And the name of the company was Cerebrum, with a VR in there. So it's a VR-based startup. And this actually happened in a very peculiar way. So a colleague of mine, we were both working on a large cognitive training project at the University of Illinois. And he had really gotten into doing VR experiments, like cognitive science experiments in VR. And one of the things that he wanted to do, at some point he decided that he wanted to start up a business on this to do cognitive training experiments in VR and see, if there were skills that you could teach in VR and ways that you could do training in VR that would be desirable. So he came to me, and I was doing a lot of the statistics and machine learning on the project, and asked me to do some of the modeling of students learning in this. Basically, just can you show that people are getting better? Can you show that they're getting better across these different skills? And I said basically, yeah, I can give it a crack. So he and I started up the business. There were actually 3 of us who were co-founders. He was the CEO and kind of the main driving force behind this, and I was kind of the CTO, the technical lead. And then we also had someone who was the kind of artist who had actually developed the VR software, the games in VR that people were going to play. And so she was the kind of the third person. And each of us put in some amount of money so we'd all have some skin in the game. And when I was writing that check, I basically said, this is the amount of money I can lose. Right. So right up front, I was like, if nothing comes of this, this was the tuition. I always wanted to find out what it was like to be in a startup. This is the tuition that I'm spending to learn that lesson. And I think that that's one message that I really give to students and everything. Like, you're investing your money and your time into these things. Make sure that's something you can lose, because you may not be super successful, but you will definitely have this experience and learn a lesson from it. And so that's good. You should have this experience. You should learn a lesson from it. That's important. So the time went on. My colleague would actually go out to a lot of trade shows, kind of show our demo and everything like that at a bunch of different places. I was still in University of Illinois. I didn't go on these training jaunts. I would sometimes have calls with the team. We would work on the software together. I would kind of give them my advice for how to build in some of the statistical forecasting stuff that you would do to kind of track people's abilities as they were leveling up in these games and in real life. And so that went on for a few months, and we actually got some traction on it. So we had a Series A funder who was interested in developing some of these VR experiences, and bought in at a fairly substantial chunk of money. And when they put in that Series A funding, my colleague actually put in a fairly substantial chunk of his own money, as kind of to control a substantial chunk of equity in the company. And so he was in for, kind of like his house-sized amount of money at that point, whereas I was in for, like a car-sized amount of money at that point. A car that I could lose, not a very nice car, a used car sort of amount of money, whereas he was in for kind of like a used house amount of money. So that was kind of the state we were in. We were developing some stuff, we were getting some traction, and about 8 months after that, I meet him at a pub in Illinois, and he is super depressed, just doesn't says everything's falling apart, doesn't want to go on, has been working on this for months and months. And we hadn't been getting tons of traction or customers or anything like that. So it wasn't like we were having massive growth. But also this was very shocking to me that he would be and have this mood. Because as near as I could tell, it's like, oh yeah, we're not the next Google, but we are developing products. We're still going, it was still early phases, right? We'd only been working on this for about a year. We had some product to show for it. If it wasn't taken off, that's just maybe we need to pivot to something else. So it was very surprising to find him in the state. But he just, wanted out, basically. And then several conversations, not immediately in that conversation, but over a series of, so I said to him, hey, it's fine, don't kill yourself, it's going to be okay, we'll make it through this, and if we need to change the company, you'll recover from this, everything will be okay. And so a few conversations after that, having said nice things to him, he came and said basically that the big problem that was going down is that he had been in a relationship without telling me with the other co-founder, and that relationship had just blown up, and that was why he was so depressed and unable to continue working with the company. And so that so it was very shocking to me. It was not a business thing. And that is kind of the second thing that I'd say to students, that very often what happens is not that you're not fit for the market or something like that, but you have some very human blow up that happens, that it's an interpersonal problem or a leadership problem or a don't sleep with your coworkers problem, that actually puts becomes this blocker that prevents you from moving forward. Because fundamentally your group is this group of people working together, and if it becomes impossible for you to work together for any kind of social or emotional reasons, then that is just as startup ending as not having product quick product acceptance or growing user base, right? So that a few weeks after that, what happened with the company was that we basically sat down and decided to split things up. My colleague actually lost a fairly substantial chunk of that house when he cashed out. I lost my tuition, but I kind of knew that going in. And our other colleague, the artist, actually got the assets of the company, and so there were some money around, and she decided to continue working on the project, basically with assistance from our Series A funder, our main Series A funder. And as far as I know, if you Google Cerebrum, it still exists, and they got some traction with one of their products, which was a VR solution to help people practice public speaking. So you do public speaking in VR, you get to see some simulated people around you, and it's kind of a nice little anxiety ramp. So it's a low stakes version that you deliver your speech to people who aren't real. That's a very low stakes version of delivering your speech. And then you can go and start delivering your speech to people who are real. So it worked out for them. And I wouldn't say it certainly hasn't set the world on fire, but it is a niche product that a lot of enterprises, that a number of enterprises use, and they've been able to kind of right the ship, and I think make back most of the Series A money in sales, and kind of do okay. They're kind of a small business now. I wouldn't say that they're a huge growth organization, but they're kind of a going small business, and they try to find clients. So it worked out for her, and I was so glad because she was in for about a new car. So in the scale of things, she was in for a nice car. I was in for a crappy car, and he was in for a house. And so it would have been, I would have had some sleepless nights had she not kind of landed on her feet, but she did, and actually came out of it okay. The other thing that came out of this is both my colleague and I were then hired at IBM Research to do a similar project. He to do a VR project, and me to do some statistical modeling of learners. So that, the skills and everything that we got in that, and the reason that we were hired is we actually met the person who would become our manager, or we had two separate managers, but the person who would become my manager was actually at the one of the trade shows that we were showing our startup in. And so this is the kind of the third lesson I'd say. It's like, it is really who you know. And I want you to think about, as you go into your startups, like, who have you met because of doing this startup? And what relationships have you built with them? Because those things really do transcend the particular business thing you're trying to do. And it's really, that's where all the value came out of it for me, right? I lost my tuition, but what I got for that tuition was a network of people, including one that I got a tech job out of. I learned a lot about how to actually run a business and do leadership. I identified a lot of landmines in interpersonal relationships that one should avoid. So I really think of it as a really meaningful and important experience in my life, though it was not super fun at the time. And the kind of the last thing that actually came out of this, and this is years later. So the salient thing, that was kind of where I left it. That was where I stopped working on that startup. I stopped thinking about that startup for several years. I felt very, pleased to get out of it in a positive way. I'm glad that everyone got out of it in a positive way. There were no disasters, even though it ended up as not like, a successful multi-million-dollar business. Nobody, nobody died. Everybody landed on their feet. My colleague, after getting the tech job, was able to pay back his family, who put in about a house-sized thing. It took him a couple of years to do that, but he managed to do it. And so everybody kind of got out of it with skin and personality intact. What I did find out a few years later is that colleague, and he's actually told me it's okay to tell people this, otherwise I keep it to myself. He later found out, he later called me up and said, hey, I was very recently diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I started that company during a manic episode. And so it was a thing that, at the time I was always like, wow, this is, I was really impressed by his level of risk tolerance. And it's hard for me to really feel the confidence to go out and start a company. And, in retrospect, maybe he wasn't starting a company for the best of reasons. Maybe he was a bit overconfident in that situation. He would describe himself now as a bit overconfident in that situation. But the last thing I want to emphasize is that it takes that level of confidence to do something so wacky as to start a startup, and to really, pour your heart and soul into it and really go out and do stuff and have a big impact. You have to be a little bit, insensitive to the risks that you're facing. And the other thing I'd emphasize is there are a lot of people out there who started startups who are successful. Look at the most successful people who start startups in the world, and they will all tell you, you just got to follow your passion. And they are wrong, because they were the ones, these massively overconfident ones who started their startups, had immediate success, and thought well, I must be the greatest person in the world, rather than I got lucky, right? And if you immediately, I've said this to students before. I did the math on this one time, that you're almost more likely to, if you can rake together about 100 grand, right? You can go to Vegas and bet it on the roulette wheel, and you are more likely to become a billionaire there than by starting a startup. It is almost more likely, right? The numbers work out pretty close, and you have to do something like you have to bet on one number and win 4 times in a row. But the odds of that are a little bit better than the odds of starting a $1 billion startup. $1 billion startups are quite rare. Most people aren't lucky. And if you were the start, you'd have to be that level of confident to walk into that, so confident you walk into a casino and bet $100 million number 4 times in a row. To be successful. So it's so like a lot of people when starting this experience doubts and are worried about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's totally normal. In fact, that shows a functioning, working, normal assessment of risk in the world, and that's okay. And that's why I emphasize to people, hey, it's just tuition. You're just trying something out. It's okay if it doesn't become $1 billion business. That's not the point. The point is to go out and have this experience and expose yourself to the world. The reason that I said yes to that colleague, and I'm grateful that I did years later. Even though at the time I thought you are crazy for taking this risk. But what I said to myself is, you are too afraid to take risks. And you need friends like this because you need to expose yourself to some level of risk in the world if you're going to live kind of a full and interesting life. And this was an opportunity, and here's an opportunity, right? If you won't take this opportunity, what opportunity will you take? And so I said yes. It turned out to be, I've never regretted it. That's not true. In the fullness of time, I do not regret it. There were moments when I regretted it, but they went away, and I turned out that it was good. I felt good about it. So, okay, so that's my 20-minute spiel. The take-home messages for me were, don't spend anything you can't lose. Don't bet anything you can't afford to lose. Remember the people that you talk to. That's more important. Interpersonal issues are much more of salient than business issues, and at the end of the day, like, you got to get lucky, and it's okay to roll the dice a few times. It's better to try that and get unlucky than never roll the dice at all. So that's my spiel. If anyone has any questions, I was going to just leave the rest of the time for questions. Yeah, Taiho, I think you were the first one with a hand up.
Yeah.
Hey again, by the way.
Yeah, hi.
Long time to see.
Yeah. So thank you for your story. So the question I have is, during your first startup, when your CEO had a breakdown, is it like, if he was in a relationship with someone outside the company, then it kind of would be not easy, but like probably more manageable. But then if it's someone within your company, I'm pretty sure it's hard. So like,
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Are you supposed to try to avoid that kind of thing, or?
Yes. I'm so glad. Okay, Tayo, like I kind of told the story in a way that assumed everyone would immediately be like, oh, and you were like, that seems wrong. And so I just want to emphasize, yes, don't do that. The other thing I'll say is, like, it's not, life is complicated. Things aren't always perfect. People try things. Sometimes it goes okay, sometimes it doesn't. In general, though, this is a good example of what the risk is, right? So, I think that I'm pretty sure he started. I'm pretty sure that actually, though he didn't tell me this, and I wish he had at the beginning. Be honest with people. It's another good take on this. He didn't really tell me that he had this relationship with the other co-founder until after it had gone sour. And I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons that he actually started the company was that, he had this, like, it's called kismet, like this amazing feeling of closeness to this other person. And that's part of what, motivated him, got him over that risk threshold to start the company. And so I'm not sure he would have done it if he wasn't in this relationship. Now, I think that it was not fair not telling me that this was why he was so interested in it. But, I think that was part of the thing. Now, I obviously, the thing that happened is pretty common. Most relationships don't work out, and that's okay. You got to try, different romantic arrangements in your life. But when that happened, he lost his house basically because that was the way he had set his life up. And so think about, the reason that we say, like, workplace relationships aren't a great idea is in part, think of the risk that you're taking on, right? It's You imagine the upside of it is, I guess, that you get to see your partner a little more often during the day. And the downside of it is that you might lose your house. And those are not balanced. And so obviously if he had been going through personal issues for other reasons, that also could have derailed the company. But the fact that it was someone within the company that he was going through his personal issues with definitely did. Right. There was no way to recover from that. And so, yeah, thank you for emphasizing that. And yeah, it's I'm very opposed to the idea that your personal life ever gets in the way of your work life, because your personal life is more important. I feel like your work life is a life support system for the personal life that you want to lead. And I think one of the problems here is, if you take your life support system and you take your the life that it's trying to support and you tape them together really closely, that is dangerous because you could lose one of those things. Now losing one of them destroys both. And so I think it's a recommendation I don't make. If you do it, please just tell the third co-founder. That's all he wants. He just wants to know up front. That will make him so happy. If only that had been done, I would have had a lot more information to work on. Of course, it may never have joined it. It may not have gone down, but at least I would have made it informed. I would have made a sane decision.
Yeah.
I think no problem. I think Andre actually had a hand up second. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about how to address interpersonal issues, because, and there's probably no hard and fast rule for this, but in the moment when everyone's in like a hurry to build or commit or whatnot, it's easy to de-emphasize the importance of how you're working, for example. So given that, and I think that the lesson really resonated, the second time around, how do you address them, right? Because they're very different contexts. You could go in before, say, a 10-week sprint and say, we're going to focus on communicating really well, or, all of that. But in the moment, it's like a very different set of levers, right? That some people don't want to pull, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple of, there are close by things and far off things. So the close by things are, just like you say, try to emphasize communication, try to de-escalate conflicts, try to really understand each other. Remember that you're working on a team with your coworkers first. Like, remember that your relationship with them is part of that personal life. That's really important. These are friends, hopefully, and colleagues and people you respect. You want to maintain those relationships because those relationships will go on past this particular sprint, right? And any damage you do to them will go on past this particular sprint. And so the stakes on those relationships are higher than any particular problem you've run into today. The thing that is much more helpful, but much less immediately helpful, is like, dude, go to therapy. Long-term, being a great communicator is a skill. Being patient with people is a skill. Being emotionally competent is a skill. Developing those skills is one of the important parts of any good life, right? Being ethical is a skill. Right? You got to practice. You got to practice every day. You got to get help. You got to get, you got to get taught. And so, yeah, go to therapy is a good answer to that. It's not immediately helpful, right? What I'm saying, and not just like therapy, but also like exercise. You eat a good meat, you eat a good diet, get plenty of sleep, right? Pay attention to your own personal life, so that you are always and ever in a position that you can be supportive and patient with other people, and that you can use good patterns of communication. Because you need to, because there's this acute problem. We're having this conflict, and there's ways to resolve that and think about, the main thing is just like, remember that you care more about these people than this conflict, right? But then there's the chronic problem of, how do I communicate well over time? How do I become the sort of person who is collegial and a good colleague and a good support system for my friends? And that's something that is a life project. It's not a business project, right? And it's something that takes years and years and years and time. And this is and this is a learning experience. And another thing that, you know, I'd emphasize about my own experiences, like it's taken me many, many years. I'm very wise now because I went through so many dumb experiences, because I was dumb before. I'm wise now. And you've got to go through a lot of bad experiences in order to kind of accumulate the knowledge you need to understand what was wrong with them. It's hard to know without actually being through it. And eventually you do go through it, and eventually you do learn. But it's a very long process, and you can help yourself. You can get a head start by diet and exercise, go to therapy, drink plenty of water, get plenty of sleep, have an active social life, have hobbies, get outside, see the sun, right? All those sorts of things are ways that you're reinforcing your inside self, so that then when those problems arise, the person who is in that situation is someone who is able to deal with it in a mature and responsible way. Yeah, Asma, I think you were next.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Professor. It's nice to hear this part of you outside of the academic world, and kind of the emphasis on the personal part of it. I think often when we talk about startups, we just talk about the business strategy and money. My question is, what are some clear red flags and green flags that you've learned when joining a startup? What is something like, and maybe this is easy to say in retrospective, but just like general things that you can look at and be like, oh yeah, this is a team that's worth working with, and this is a team, or just like a project even that's not worth working on.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to be able to give you clear red and green flags, but I can give you maybe like ochre and I don't know, chartreuse flags or something like that. Things that are like, oh, okay, it's not too bad. You know, I think that working on teams, I mean, the most straightforward thing is just like, do you actually want to do the thing? Is it, and that's actually a trickier question than it initially appears, because it's there's the story of what you're doing in your startup, which is what you tell, you know, your investors and everything like that. Oh, we're going to revolutionize. I guess let's use Greenwood as an example. We're going to revolutionize home plant care, right? Home gardening, right? And you may care very deeply about that, right? But what you actually do is, you know, I hit a machine learning API. I develop a web page, right? And you might not, and that may suck, right? And so, oh, hang on, sorry, my cat is informing me that this room is prison. In a few seconds, the cat is going to inform me that the other room that I have released her into is a prison, and that I have to go and let her back into this one. Turn on the light. So the day-to-day thing is really important. It's like a green flag for me is like, if I enjoy working on the day-to-day tasks of the thing, it's intellectually interesting and challenging to me, and I like working with the people and talking to them, and things seem to be getting done in a concrete fashion. Like I can point to things that exist that didn't exist a week ago, right? Then that, like, the biggest green flag I would say is like, you are having a positive experience at work, right? You can see your work being put into action, and stuff is coming out at the end, and you're making progress, and you feel good doing it, and you go to sleep okay every night because you're like, okay, I made progress, I got stuff done, right? If you can see kind of the little units of product rolling off the conveyor belt day after day because of stuff you did, that's very satisfying to me, and I think that that's very important. The other thing I'd emphasize is very much like I've said before with the tuition thing, that's something I want to feel anyway, right? And so then the grand success of the grand mission is less important because I enjoy what I do on a day-to-day basis, right? So that's very, very important. It's like, just is the actual work any good, right? If the actual work is awful, then that's good. The other thing that is just a second. The other thing that is a little tricky here is to really, this is one that's hard to know for sure, but I think is really important, and it's more like a red flag, is if you feel like this is something, I'm trying to figure out the best way to address this. If you feel that this project comes from like your identity, and is deeply embedded in who you are, right? Or that's usually pretty good. That's usually a good thing. If you feel like this project is something that is something kind of that you aspire to be or something like that, that is trickier. The one thing that a thing I emphasize over and over again to people is like, kind of, I don't want people to feel alone because I stress all the time. I'm like, no, I'm here for you, and you've got lots of support and network and things like that. But when it comes to getting the stuff done, you're alone, right? You are the ones. It's like the analogy I make is like, it's like the dishes in the sink when you live alone. When you live with someone else and their dishes in the sink, they don't get done because you're always like, oh well, the other person, those are those other person's dishes, right? And that your dishes are also in there, and you didn't wash them. But there's enough plausible deniability. When you live alone, you always wash all the dishes because, or you don't, right? But you don't blame anyone else for it because you're like, well, I am the only person here. It's my job to get all these dishes washed. And so one of the things that I think is a sign of a good startup is everyone washes all their dishes. It's really clear what work is yours. Everything it's really, there's no conflict over that. It's really clear that I'm doing this one thing because I'm the person who's really competent at it. It's something that flows directly out of my identity. So of course I'm the one who does this, right? The roles are really clear. The leadership is really easy because everybody knows everybody has a clear desire to do a particular part of the project. And in that concrete way that I mentioned before. And the failure mode, it's more common to see the failure mode. And the failure mode feels more like just being confused about what to do. And when you're confused about what to do, it's usually because you've identified something that isn't something that you deeply understand and kind of comes from inside your own identity, but it's something that seems like the market wants it. And the stuff that seems like the market wants it, you are going to, it's too late. The moment you hear about an idea, someone else has already been working on it for, like, information gets pumped out through Twitter and stuff like that from a person who's already done the invention. So as soon as you hear about like, oh, this, AI thing, making, I know AI-based videos or something like that, it's done. It's already. And so you can't look out at the world and try to figure out what the things are in the world that you want to do. You have to kind of look inside yourself and say, what are the things that I'm actually specifically positioned to succeed at given my identity? I'd actually use a great example of this, Barbara, actually, in your class, who is just like, I'm going to do this women in tech thing because I'm a woman who learned to do programming, and I'm going to make a business where I teach other women to do programming. And I'm like, how could anyone question her authority to do that? Right. And she's doing it. What's more, it's like, it's specifically for like, I think she's from Paraguay, and it's like specifically for women in Paraguay. And I'm like, okay, well, yes, you are the world authority on that. Everyone will, no one can question that you're the right person to do that. And so being in a situation like that, I really think is indicative of being in a position, because it's like, it's complicated to explain. Sorry it took me so long to explain that, but like, it's complicated to explain. It's like, are you the right person to do this? Right? What's specifically useful about you in this problem? And I often feel like I hesitate to say that to students because they feel like it's sort of aggressive. Like I'm saying, like, well, who are you to tell me what this is? But I'm saying, no. Who are you to tell me about this? What is true about you? You are specific and unique and special and uniquely positioned to do something, right? It'll probably be something about your local community because that's where you are. It'll probably involve the people that you know, your friends and relatives, because those are the people you know, right? What is that thing, right? It'll probably involve your hobbies. Hell, you'll probably like doing it, right? If it was like, and I often, I say this and this will reveal more about me, but like, if it's like, if what you love to do is just watch YouTube videos all day, there's a business there, right? There is something that you can do in that space, right? With your actual day-to-day life, the actual things that you do on a day-to-day basis are the things that you have control over. And that's the place where you can actually get the most traction, because that's the stuff you know. And that's the stuff that you alone can do. No one else in the world has access to that same point that you do. And so that is to me, I think, a good way to go. It's like you have those kinds of, it should be really, really personal to you. Yeah, I guess Dan.
I don't have a fully formed question. I have some thoughts that this conversation has made me think about, and I'll just sort of talk for a couple minutes and then I'll stop and you can respond.
That's cool. My answers are surely not fully formed answers, Dan.
Okay. I'm thinking about in this program, we are, part of this program is certainly educational. We want Minerva and Masasan Foundation students to try and make a viable startup and see what happens and learn and grow. I'm especially excited about the younger Masasan Foundation students in the program. Taiho, this is the second year. Really excited to have Taiho here, and all of the others. But another thing I'm thinking about is there are sort of different kinds of entrepreneurs. So there are serial entrepreneurs, and then there are more people who are like one and done, like Ben Nelson, the founder of Minerva. Do you know how many startups Ben Nelson has founded in his life?
A number, yeah.
One.
Oh, just one? I thought two.
One. Minerva. No, he worked at Snapfish and others.
I guess
Minerva
yeah.
He didn't found it. Minerva's his only startup.
Yep.
A good friend of mine from undergrad, he's 33 years old. He's founded 9 startups. But the way that he views entrepreneurship is almost more intellectual. He's a very smart person. He's like, I've identified this need in the market. I'm going to build a business around it and then spin it off and find an exit. And then I'm going to do that again. And so there's this flow, serial entrepreneurship. It's not necessarily based on such a core, deep passion, like in Ben Nelson's case, but it's more just like, I'm a smart person who understands how to build a business and the flow of creating a startup. And so I'm just going to do this over and over again because it's fun and I make a little money. It's not better or worse. There's not one right way to do it. But I guess I'm wondering, in thinking about our students here in Masasan Foundation and Minerva, and this program, or more generally, what are your thoughts about the different kinds of ways to do entrepreneurship?
They're all fine, I guess. Sorry to make it a short answer.
Or sort of respond, however, with whatever that made you think about.
I think people have very different goals and very different ways of seeing the starting up businesses is sort of a human practice, and different people want different things out of their life. But the category of starting up businesses is sort of this broad thing. You get lots of different things out of it. So for someone like Ben with Minerva, I think that Minerva serves for Ben this really deep and personal need, which has to do probably with trust and respect and institutions, and he had some negative personal experience with some kind of institution at some point, or things like that. He has this personal history that drives him to do this particular thing and to really hold on to it and grip it tightly and do this one thing, right? And not try to find an exit, and not try to continue to be the day-to-day management of it as well as the founder of it, right? And that was what he wanted out of this. And he sees himself as sort of having almost a policy role, I feel like, in the way that he approaches Minerva, rather than like he just wants to Some serial entrepreneurs, also, I've encountered several, and they have different goals. So some are driven. Some are really driven by profit seeking, and they want to make money, and they start a bunch of businesses in part just kind of for portfolio diversification. And their goal is business management. Their goal is to start businesses that are profitable. Others see it as sort of a way to do social impact. Others see it as just kind of an intellectual thing. Like, I get to invent a bunch of stuff. And I enjoy the feeling of generating something, but I don't enjoy the feeling of running it. And so I'm just going to do it and move on, right? And the other thing that I think really deserves to get a platform there is people are in different positions to start businesses, and in this, they just have different amounts of resources, right? And social access. And the main thing you need to start a business is money and social access. And so if you're a serial entrepreneur, you probably have wider social networks than most people, because you can start businesses in a lot of different domains. And that must mean you know people in a lot of different domains, right? Everybody needs I forget the guy for it. It's Shep something, Disney's sidekick. Disney had a sidekick. Oh, the most famous, of course, is the Woz. So every jobs needs a Woz. Everybody needs someone that they know who can help them actually do the lifting of starting a business. And that you can get that with money, you can get that with social access. You can just be in the right place at the right time. There's also I'm gonna use the example of this is something weird to express, but I think it's been really useful for me to understand human beings in the world. And so I wanted to tell people this. I'm basing this on my friend Avi, who is a serial entrepreneur and starts all kinds of wacky businesses that seem unconnected. He's sort of broadly interested in climate change, maybe sort of, but like the thread isn't super clear. So folks who come from like a wealthy family, a wealthy background, who have a ton of money and a ton of resources, do not engage with the world as if their actions matter, because they don't. If you have $1 billion, nothing you do will generate $1 billion. You are a vehicle of capital. And if you make good, Mohan Lavik, who founded Great Rock in India and worked for a long time as kind of Masters of the Universe finance guy, said this best to me when he said, we make smart decisions. We're smart. We are smart people. But the reason that we get the reason we are so powerful is that we have 9 zeros behind the decisions we make. And $1 billion, like a billion, a human being can move 1,000 shovelfuls of earth in a day, but they can't move 1 billion shovelfuls of earth in a lifetime, because 1 billion is that much bigger. And so if you have $1 billion to bet on something, the impact that you can have is more than a human can accomplish in a lifetime. And so if you have a big ball of resources, you don't matter. Your actions as an individual human being don't matter. You can make decisions, you can put that money, you can bet that money on things. And the amount of leverage that you have, the amount of force that you can exert is more than a human can exert in their life. And so people who have those resources can do things that people who don't can't. And a lot of the starting of businesses, it's reflected in their behavior in weird ways. So when I talked about like Avi, like he it's very hard for us to have lunch together, because he'll say like, we should have lunch together. And what he means is do all the work of setting up a lunch with me, because he doesn't even know how to set up lunch with people, because he's used to other people doing that for him, because he has a lot of money, right? Because his individual ways of interacting with the world are via his resources. He's a big ball of resources. He throws his big ball of resources around to make things happen. He understands how to operate it well, right? But it's not his skills that are making the big, crazy stuff happen is the fact that he has a big ball of resources. And so that is a big part that needs to be said. Not everybody is in the position of having a big ball of resources. Many of us need to leverage our personal skills and intelligence, right? But if you have a big ball of resources, the game is different, and you play it differently. And part of what you're trying to do when you start the business is you're trying to go through that growth arc where you become the sort of thing that can throw around those big balls of resources and cause change through that, rather than having to, you're trying to set up the system that kind of returns and returns and returns and goes exponential, and then you've got that big ball of resources, and then you have tons of force that you can throw around and make change with. And so that is a big part, I think, of when you look at folks like that from the outside. Hey, what are they working with? What resources do they have? They have a ton of cultural capital. They have a ton of wealth. Those things really matter. Those things really do allow them to do things that you just can't achieve through other mechanisms. And so, I have reasonable expectations for everyone, because not everyone is a big ball of resources. If someone's a big ball of resources, please tell me, because I can make suggestions. But I think most that's fairly rare.
Just adding to the few comments based on my experience. I think many of my friends, they exit their companies. Some of them, they went to a public. Some of them, they got acquired. Some of them, they got acquired, right? And then I saw different price range. I noticed that because I went through acquisition process to 23 companies. I noticed that usually under $50 million acquisition, that's happened because of your personal connection. And then if beyond probably 50 or 100, that's very the business acquisition, it's become a product acquisition, business acquisition. They wanted to acquire the resource of the company too, right? The thing is actually I didn't know probably for anyone who wanted to start your business or who wanted to start your startup, that's especially the first time, exiting your company is kind of dream things, right? But thing is, as I went through, in my case, it didn't happen because investor didn't agree upon the price. And the thing is, it's kind of funny how network can driven actually much bigger decision in many ways, especially this industry. And then as the Watson say, some they know how they can exit company, because now I kind of know how we can go to a public in Japan, because what's the requirement? It's much lower than the US. And then I know kind of how you can exit your company within 2 to 3 or 4 year cycle. And then that's actually a fast-paced way to do it, because I know the process, I know the people, I know the kind of enterprise who might be interested too, right? That's also insight. I did it after doing almost 10 years. But things back then, when I was 21, my first business was basically running the event company in Tokyo. So I have no idea about business, right? Basically making cash every day. And then another one is I didn't announce anything, but thing is probably it's fine. It's kind of the right time. So I tried to raise my fund basically past year and a half, and then I decided not to do it. That was a decision I made the last month. So I didn't say anything publicly yet. But the thing is, I noticed that was a first time for me just to raise fund, own fund, right? I talked to 100 of investors, and I noticed that this is kind of a wealth creation game. So if you have more money, actually you are not actually taking that much risk, because 99% of the capital in the world is owned by 0.001 or 0.001% of the people, right? So this is kind of a broken system capitalism. That's kind of I feel it. But things another one they can do is, because they have so much money, they can take a risk too, right? This is kind of a different type of role. That's government, they are supposed to do it for a citizen, also entrepreneurs who can take a risk for something innovative too, right? So kind of I feel a different type of the wealth creation, how they can bring a different type of impact to the society in this planet. But thing is, that's kind of I wanted to add it to the things you guys discussed today too.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to 2 things you said there. So the first thing that you said is it took you 10 years to figure out how to do something in 4 years. And I have had that experience so often. Like it's like the things that I don't even understand the concepts that I use. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have even understood the concepts that I now use to navigate stuff. So it's like everything you have to build up this knowledge on top of itself for such a long period of time. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That's so accurate to me. And then the second thing, and this actually came up earlier today, I was talking to Rhythm and Hero, and this came up, and I wanted to emphasize this. It's your second part about wealth creation. Rhythm asked, kind of like, do you think it's possible that we'll get funded by, SoftBank or something like as we do our startups? And what I said was, the reason it hasn't happened yet is that I think a lot of students have a version of money in their mind where money is like this resource that you get. And so they're when they look at this, they're like, oh, if I do a very good job on my assignment, I will get a gift, and the gift will be some money. And that with that mindset, you won't get funded, because the investors don't care that you've done a good job. The investors want to know, the investors are giving you a loan. They expect that money back. They expect 10x that money back, right? They are not doing this because they like you. They're not your parents giving you an allowance. They are loaning your business money to scale, and they expect all of that money back with interest 10 times over. And that is not and so when the second thing that kind of happens when you hear that is like, oh my God, I can't do that, right? I'll never get that money back. It was so hard to get that money from them. And I'm like, that's not how money works. All right. You guys are going to make money out of nothing. That's the goal, right? You're not taking money from your customers. Your customers want the thing that you're giving them more than they want the money that they have. That's why they give it to you. They are trading you their money for that thing because they're like, this is more valuable to me. My life will be better now that I have your product than it was before, right? And so just by making that swap, now if you ask you, is your life better now that you have this money? You'll say yes. And you ask them, is your life better now that you have this product? They should say yes. So everyone should be getting a good deal, right? And that's the way in which your investors are approaching you too. They say like, I want to fund you because I want you to succeed too. I want, if I'm going to give you money so that I get 10x my investment back, I also want you to get 10x this investment back. I want there to just be 20x this investment generated, right? And that 20x this investment generated, you will generate by selling your product to customers, each one of whom will say this was a good deal. And so ideally, everyone in the entire system, no one in the system is losing anything. Everybody is just better off. That's what you should be aiming for. You're not aiming to take money from anyone. You're not aiming to take money from your investors. You're all aiming, everyone should make money, right? The thing you and your investor are doing is something with money and time, right? They're lending you money now because they have it now and they want it later. And you're taking the money now because you don't have money now, but you will have it later. So you think you can pay them back. That's the engagement you're in. It's just a temporal thing, right? It's not that you're not generating stuff. And so one of the things that Jim is really emphasizing is wealth creation, right? You guys want to create something that will make everybody better off. Your investors will want to invest because that will make them better off. You will want to take their investment because it will make you better off. Your customers will want to buy your product because it will make them better off. You will want to sell to your customers because it will make you better off. Everyone should be better off. If you can't deliver that, if someone has to get scammed, you probably don't have a sustainable solution, because people will figure out that you're scamming. And you can't scam money out of your investors and then not deliver. It's a loan. You have to pay it back, right? It's a scam you don't want to run, because the consequences of it are worse than the reward. So that's the thing I really emphasize. You can do good stuff through this vehicle. You just have to make sure that you're treating everybody well. And that's entirely possible. It's entirely possible to do well, treating everybody well. Not in every case, right? It's also, watch your externalities, things like that, be ethical. But the goal is to do that. That's the goal. The thing you're aspiring to is like generate wealth and make everybody happy. Yep. We're at the end of time, Jen. Jen said, Dan, is this another question or is that just up from before? Okay, great. I think we're at time. Let's wrap up. Oh, Jen, you're on mute. Do you want to do a wrap up?
I think Jen wants to take a screenshot with all of us.
Oh, I see.
Jen has the best backgrounds. It's always something like spaceship or something cool like astral.
I think that's it. Is that a TIE fighter? I can never tell.
I think
Not
TIE fighter
super-
cockpits are a little smaller.
Maybe he's got a very luxurious one.
Or is it the Millennium Falcon?
Falcon is a good guess.
Yes, it was. It is a Millennium Falcon. Sorry, like my PC started to be like
Nice.
funny, so I couldn't unmute myself. Yeah, let's. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And then actually, it's a great segue because the next week in 2 weeks we're gonna talk about how fundraising works too, like legally. What's the expectation? What type of like investor? How you guys can raise money too. That's actually a perfect segue. That's Watson shared the story too, and then we can do a group picture right now. Right. I think I might.
Get that lighting a little nicer.
My PC.
worse.
1 second, sorry. This PC is getting very slow. Okay. All right. Let's take a group picture. All right. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Awesome. Cool. In that case, thank you so much for your time today. Let's see you guys on Slack then.
Of course. See y'all soon.
Bye bye. All right.
Thank
Have
you.
a good
Bye-bye.
one.
Night-night.
Bye.